Chapter 17. "Where is he?" Shelby asked, wringing her hands for the 5th time in fewer than 5 minutes as she checked the front door again. It was 6:30 and they would be opening the door soon, but Tucker was nowhere to be seen. Kenzie placed a hand on her arm. "Relax, he'll be here. What if he doesn't show up? He hasn't even called today. What if he got in a wreck or something happened to his dad? We have no presents if he doesn't show up." Kenzie grabbed both of Shelby's shoulders and shook her. "Stop it. You'll drive yourself crazy with what-ifs. What is it you always say about worry?" Shelby sighed as she pictured the pastor at her church sharing the wisdom that had stuck with her for so many years. "Worrying accomplishes nothing except taking time away from today." She knew the pastor was right, and the Bible instructed God's children not to worry or fear, but to cast those worries and fears on Jesus instead. But it was a lot easier said than done. "Right. This is going to be a magical evening, Shelby. Don't tarnish it by worrying about what you can't control." Shelby took a deep breath and nodded. The place was magical. Kenzie had hung twinkly lights around the room, along with wreaths and streamers in red, green, and white. The artificial tree, while small, twinkled merrily and boasted the many ornaments the kids had hung on it. It even had a few uneven strands of popcorn, though none long enough to wrap all the way around, as the kids had eaten it before it reached that point. A long table held the cookies and treats Shelby had picked up on the way here. She had also set out punch and cups, plates and napkins. All that was missing were the kids, who were on their way, and the presents. Shelby glanced out the window again and ran a hand down her red party dress. She almost never wore red, but Kenzie had been adamant that she wear something bright and festive tonight. Kenzie had also done her makeup, even though Shelby had protested the red lip color that matched her dress but seemed too bright for her. Without a conscious thought, her hand found the tendril that never stayed up with the rest of her hair and tugged on it. "Will you stop?" Kenzie scolded, slapping her hand down. Shelby flushed. She hated getting caught twirling her hair, but she supposed she could have worse habits. In high school, she had known a girl who pulled out her eyebrows and eyelashes. Oftentimes, she would come to school with entire patches missing. There was also a boy who had scratched at his arm so often that it would bleed. The teacher would stop the bleeding, the wound would scab over, and then he would scratch the scab off and make it bleed again. Yes, in comparison, her hair twirling was a minor, albeit obnoxious, habit. Headlights flashed, blinding her as a car pulled into the parking lot. "Please be him," she thought. "Please be Tucker." But it wasn't. She recognized Benji's mother's car as soon as it grew closer. "Do we go ahead and let them in?" she asked Kenzie in a quiet voice. "Of course we do," Kenzie said. "It's freezing out here, and I promise everything will be okay." Shelby nodded, but as another car pulled in, she couldn't help but wonder what they would do if Tucker didn't show. "Thanks for agreeing to do this, guys." Tucker looked around at the assembled group of football players. Not only had most of the guys from his team agreed to come, but Emmett, his old teammate from the Rebels, had arrived as well. The Rebels were already out of the playoffs for the year, and as his wife's family lived close to Southlake, he had decided that he would help out and then drive out to meet them. "What exactly are we doing, Tucker?" Emmett asked. "We are playing Santa to some kids who deserve it," Tucker said with a smile. He had spent entirely too much money on the toys and new equipment, but he knew in his heart it would be worth it. "Everyone grab a gift, and let's load up." He glanced at his watch as the guys began grabbing packages. They were a little behind schedule, but he didn't think Shelby would mind when she saw what he had in store. He grabbed a few packages and carried them out to his truck. The back was already loaded up with presents, but there was room for 2 more. He slid them in and then turned to see how the other guys were doing. They had decided to ride 3 in a truck, but even with that, they still needed 4 trucks to carry all the packages. When the last box was loaded and the men were situated in the trucks, Tucker climbed behind the wheel of his own. Emmett and Blaine were riding with him, something he never thought he'd see. "This is a nice gesture," Emmett said as Tucker turned the key. "Thanks, Rev. I guess you rubbed off on me more than you or I knew." Blaine surprisingly stayed quiet. Tucker didn't mind, though. He enjoyed catching up with him as they drove to the center. His eyes widened as he pulled into the center's parking lot, though. There were more cars than he could ever remember seeing parked in the parking lot. So many that he was forced to park in the fire lane because there were no open spots. "Are these cars here for the party?" Blaine asked. "I think so," Tucker said. "I hope we brought enough gifts," Emmett said, as if reading Tucker's mind. "Well, if we didn't, then I'll just have to go shopping again tomorrow." As he turned the engine off, he spied a figure clad in red speeding his direction. Was that Shelby? He blinked, not believing his eyes. He'd assumed from the color of the dress that it had to be Kenzie, but Kenzie's hair was dark, and the hair on this woman was definitely blonde. His heart skipped a beat as he stepped out to meet her. "What took you so long?" she asked when she was within earshot. "The kids are waiting inside, and I'm running out of ways to entertain them." He could hear the frustration in her voice, and it matched the expression on her face, but he couldn't concentrate on her words. His focus was drawn to her mouth. Her beautiful lips were painted cherry red, and they screamed that they wanted to be kissed. There was makeup around her eyes that brought out their color as well, and something about the red against her skin made it appear creamier than he remembered. Every bone in his body ached to take her in his arms, but he couldn't do that right now. Right now, it was all about the kids. "I'm sorry." He took her hands, unable to keep himself from touching a small part of her. "We took a little longer loading up than I thought we would, but I promise it will be worth it." She glanced briefly down at their hands before meeting his gaze. "We?" At that moment, the passenger door opened behind him, and Blaine and Emmett stepped out. Then, as if in sync, the door of the other 3 trucks opened, and their players tumbled out as well. "Yeah, I brought a few friends." He squeezed her hands, enjoying the expression of shock painted across her face. "Now go tell those kids that it's time to open presents." With a final incredulous glance, she turned around and dashed back into the center. Tucker turned to his friends and motioned them with his hands. "Let's go, boys." Tucker could scarcely believe it was the same center as he walked in. The feel of Christmas was everywhere. From the decorative wreaths hung about the room, to the sounds of White Christmas playing softly over the speakers, to the artificial Christmas tree near the far end. It sparkled with every color of light, and probably every ornament the center had from the looks of it. The only thing missing was presents. The room had been filled with a dull chatter, but as he and the other football players walked in, a hush fell across the room. Kids and parents alike stared at them as if the men were mirages in a desert, and everyone appeared afraid to make the first move or say a word for fear they might disappear. "It's Tucker!" Benji's voice echoed across the room, and Tucker smiled. He was glad Benji was here. He had a special present for the boy. "I knew he'd make it!" And then the dam broke. The kids raced across the floor shouting, "Merry Christmas!" and asking about the presents. "Are those for us?" "One at a time," Tucker said with a smile. "Let my friends set the gifts down first." The children quieted, but Tucker could see their barely contained energy with each bounce of a foot or bob of a head. They were calm now, but it wouldn't last long. "First, let me introduce my friends. This is my friend Emmett Brown. I played with him on the San Antonio Rebels, where he still plays. He drove down here just to meet you guys." Eyes widened and jaws dropped as the kids looked at Emmett. Next to him is Blaine Hollis. I'm sure you guys recognize him as the quarterback for the Tornadoes. He continued the process until every player had been introduced. "Now, my friends have some gifts for you guys. Who wants presents?" The screams of the children rocked Tucker back, and he chuckled. They were certainly excited. "All right, let's open some presents. If you like dolls and dress-up clothes, I want you to find a player holding a pink gift. And if you like sports and cars, find a player with a blue gift." As they hadn't known who all would be in attendance or what they might like, Tucker had figured wrapping all of the presents in pink and blue would be the easiest way to get the right type of gift to the right child. This would allow the kids to choose the type of gift they might enjoy more. The children scrambled around, deciding on which gift they wanted, And when every child had one, Tucker gave the announcement they could open them. Chaos ensued. Paper was ripped and thrown into the air. Squeals of laughter and shouts of joy echoed throughout the room. And as soon as their gift was open, the kids were off showing it to their parents, their friends, or just playing with it in the middle of the floor. Tucker touched the gift still in his pocket as he made his way over to Benji and his mother. Benji had ended up with a microscope, something Tucker was sure the boy would enjoy with his love of science. "Hey, Benji, do you like your gift?" The smile on the boy's face said more than words ever could. "I love it, Mr. Tucker. Thanks for doing this for us." His mother, a pale, slender woman with mousy brown hair, who looked as if life had been harder on her than necessary, sniffed and wiped a tear from her eye. "Yes, thank you. This is more than we could have hoped for." Emotion choked Tucker's throat and he coughed to clear it. I actually have one more gift for Benji, if that's okay." Questions filled her eyes, but she nodded. "Benji, I probably won't be playing in the game, but I have 2 tickets with your name on them. Would you like to come see the Tornadoes play in person? You and your mother would be my guests in the luxury box." Benji's eyes grew to the size of $50. "Really? Me?" "Yes, you." Tucker knelt in front of the boy and placed a hand on his knee. "I don't have any kids yet, but when I do, I hope I have a son just like you, so it would be amazing if you could come to the game." Benji turned his face to his mother. "Mom, can we? It's too much." Emotion filled the woman's voice, and another tear escaped from her eye. "No, it's not. Please come." He placed the 2 tickets in her hand. "I insist. Merry Christmas." She nodded, and though she could say no more, he could read the thanks in her teary gaze. "That was very kind of you, Tucker." Tucker turned to see Sylvie Sanders and her cameraman behind him. "Thank you. I'm glad you could make it. Have you had a chance to get some footage of the party?" "I have, but I am curious as to why you called me out here. Does this have anything to do with your suspension for Sunday's game?" So she'd heard about that. He opened his mouth to tell her it did, to tell her that Jude Renfro had been the donor last year and pulled his donation because of the skirmish with Tucker. But then he realized his motives for donating to this party would come into question. Yes, he wanted to play Sunday, more than anything, but he didn't want to ruin this moment for the kids. "No, it actually isn't, Sylvie. I called you out here because I wanted the people of Southlake to see what an amazing center this is, what fantastic kids these are, and what an outstanding job Director Shelby Doll is doing here. This party almost didn't happen because they couldn't find a donor to fund it. I couldn't let that happen. After volunteering here for the last week, I have seen firsthand how important this center is to the families who use it. I know that not everyone can donate the way I did, but everyone can do something, even if it's volunteering their time." "So you don't care about the game Sunday?" Tucker smiled and shook his head. "Of course I care about the game Sunday. It's the wild card game. If we win, we continue on in the playoffs. But if we lose, it'll be the last game of the season. Do I wish I was playing? Absolutely. But I learned an important lesson. I was suspended because I got into an altercation with someone after our last game. Even though I didn't throw the first punch and was just defending myself, I was in the bar because I was angry. I was angry at our loss, angry at being traded, angry at my father. Working here has let me see how misplaced that anger was. It has showed me how lucky I am to play on a great team with these other amazing players who came out tonight to help me bring some Christmas cheer to these kids." "Well, that is certainly a feel-good story that our viewers will enjoy," Sylvie said as she motioned for the cameraman to stop rolling. "Off the record, though, do you know why the previous donor chose not to donate this year?" Tucker flashed her a tight-lipped smile. He knew what she was trying to do, but he wasn't going to bite. He'd given her enough information that if she really wanted to run with that story, she could look it up herself. Instead, he pointed over her shoulder at the refreshment table. "I need to see Shelby about something. If you'll excuse me."